Okay, we are in the middle of the 13th letter. It is the Chitas for the 13th of Elul in a standard year. And we're working off of this pasuk, which comes from Tehillim, chapter 31. The Hebrew here, as you see, reads Marav Tuvcha. And hopefully you could see here how it's not Toiv. Sorry about that. It's not Toiv, but Tuv with the Shurak vowel, the vowel that goes inside the Vav, not the vowel that goes above the Vav, which suggests that it's not just great, but it's the greatest, the highest level. How great is your goodness that you have? Now, note here, laid away is one term. It suggests it is hidden in Hebrew, tzafanta, for those who fear you, that you have worked for those who take refuge in you. And here's the next one, in the presence of the sons of men. So this level is both described as hidden away, tzafanta, like we refer to the afikomen. In Hebrew, it's called safun, that which is hidden away. And it is also referred to as in the presence of men. So it's both hidden away and visible. So again, it appears to be a conflict, and we will explore that. So what we have started to talk about in this chapter is the two aspects in our service of Hashem. Now, the overarching purpose of this letter, which we will discover at the end, where we will see the full-on letter. Maybe these were originally actually written as communal letters or appeals, as a means of transporting communication, was an appeal for tzedakah for the residents of Eretz Yisrael. And as we will see at the end, in a part of this letter, which is not printed in the Tanya, but we do have the remainder of that text, which we'll learn about, it's the Alter Rebbe essentially making the plea that people should go beyond just their basic routine or beyond their nature. And again, we are all, not us, of course, but we're all tempted to follow this pathway to say, well, this is the kind of person I am. I'm not very academic, so I can't study Torah, or I'm not very devout, so I can't daven, or I'm not very whatever, and therefore you can't expect this from me. And one of the core messages is that not only do you have to do everything, even if it's not the thing that is necessarily, as we like to use the word, comfortable for me, but something far more profound is that we are all tapped into Atzmus, the essence of Hashem. And the essence of Hashem is, of course, infinite. And therefore, we all have access to the infinity of Hashem, while acknowledging, and as we'll see in some great detail, not just being portrayed as like, and I use this disparagingly, lazy, like I only like to do what I like to do. But it is absolutely true that we are all born with certain strengths, and those proclivities and those personality traits, spiritual personality traits, shape not only what we like to do, but even what we maintain should be done. That is, it manifests itself in halachic decision, not just in preferences to the vanilla chocolate type of thing, but actual expression of rigid, seemingly unbending, purely academic law and rule, as we'll see. And still, we are required, we are encouraged, we are able to reach a little beyond that level and touch that neshama level that is Atzmus Orein Sof, the infinity of Hashem that exists within us. We too have this infinity of Hashem. And here we go. So again, if you have the standard print of the Tanya, it's page Kufya Test, and you see it starts a new paragraph. If you have the lessons in Tanya or any of the other wonderful translations, you'll find this in the Chitas for the 13th of Elul on a standard year. So here we go. V'hine, behold, Kol Ish Yisrael. We actually read a couple of these lines last week, but I thought it would be good to get a little running start. Every Jewish Ish. Now, the word Ish, again, we commonly translate it as man, but it's not male as opposed to female, but it's more the idea of human. But here, when we talk about Ish as opposed to Adam, Enosh, and Gever, remember 4 different terms, we're referring to our character, or what we sometimes call our emotional state of being. Sometimes that term emotional gets a bad rap, like someone's very emotional. Usually we don't see that as a virtue. We see that as somebody who's flighty, or they're angry, or they're sad, or it's something. It doesn't carry a connotation of something that's very revered. But in our context, this is what we're after. I mean, we're not just after our behavior. So everybody in their emotional character, the way in which they relate to Hashem, has to incorporate these two levels. Now, just to tie it to the parshas of the last few weeks, Yosef is sold by his brothers in the city of Shechem, and then he is ultimately awarded that area, which is where he's buried to this day. The word Shechem, in addition to being the name of a specific city, it is the term for the shoulders. And we talk about that's where the division takes place. A person has one head, one face, he has his two eyes and ears, but right, left is really in the shoulders more than it is in the face. We're not here to study anatomy. The concept being that we have right, left. We talk about this in the secular world as well. Right brain, left brain. Some people are more artistic. Some people are more rigid, and so on. Just to share a story, people here know David Sokoloff. When he used to work for Hallmark Cards in Kansas City, the campus there was very strongly, very I don't know what the word is, like deliberately divided into two sections. There were the suits, as they called them, that is the business people who ran the business side of Hallmark, and there were the artists. And the building where the business people was very stark. It was, gray flannel suit kind of thing. And where the artists were, it was very bright, and there was music, and there was paints, and anything they could do to stimulate the creativity. And curiously, just to play that out for a moment, what they came to realize, as he described it, was they couldn't really separate them so rigidly. Yes, it's true that they didn't want the salesman to get caught up in the artistic side, and they didn't want the artist to get squashed by the business side. But they realized that if the artists didn't really understand the business side, and if the business people didn't really understand the artistic side, they really would be too separated out, and they couldn't really sell the cards, and they couldn't really understand the process. So there had to be an adjustment made where there was like bridges built between these two buildings so that the artists understood the business side and the business people understood the artistic side. So this is what we're talking about. We generally divide up, again, the shoulders. We divide up everything in the two categories: the desire to be closer to Hashem, Avas Hashem, which is associated with all of what we call the right side midos, including from the intellectual side, that is chachma, imagination, that's open-ended, chesed, which is limitless giving, and netzach, which is endurance and stick-to-itness, and nothing's going to stop me. And the left side, which is associated with bina, which is the analysis, gevura, which is the strength of self. Like Pirkei Avos says, it is harder to control oneself than it is to conquer a city. And hoid, which is the resistance of my own assertion so that I give glory to Hashem or to other people. So we often talk about these as right, left. And there is definitely a temptation for a person to fall into, well, I'm a right side person. I'm a chesed person. I'm a big chachma person. I can't deal with the details. Or you and the artsy and this whole like lost thing. I can't, give me some math, give me some reliability, give me some definition. And again, we have a tendency to gravitate towards that, those areas which are more familiar or comfortable for us. I mean, again, just to use as an illustration that we're familiar with, in the American school system, we give a kid basically a smorgasbord. He gets a little English, he gets a little history, he gets a little math, he gets a little music, and we hope that he will sort of find where his strength is. And, we often don't. Or really what we come to recognize is that we are essentially tied into the infinity of Hashem, and therefore we are not so binary. We're not so either right or left. And this is the line that the Alter Rebbe declares here. Every single person of Israel, and again, why does he have to say person of Israel? So the term ish is a reference to, again, what we refer to as the emotional side. And Yisrael is because he has a chelik elakam imal mamish, because he has an actual spark of Hashem. That's why he is kolul. He includes mi beis bechinas elu, both of these characteristics. And in our perhaps more modern society, we call this being very understanding. But it's more than that, meaning when the Alter Rebbe says, and there is no matter, there is no character trait that says, well, that's never valuable. And that is not only for other people, but for me as well. And here, again, the Alter Rebbe is directing us to override our proclivity to gravitate only to what is good for me. That is, when I say good, I mean comfortable, what I like, what I'm skilled at, what is meaningful to me, what aligns with my spiritual personality. So again, it's the old saying, how do you know what your personal avodah is? So one is that which goes well for you. And if you are not destined for that, it's not going to work. Then the other, that which is most difficult for you. Oh, that's really, your Yetzer Hara smells it, and it knows that that's your particular destiny, and that's why it's so difficult. So what's your destiny? That which is easy for you and that which is hard for you. Well, which one is it? Right? I don't know. It's a combination, and this is the infinity that gets introduced, and it is the uncomfortable part. We have to be Torah study. We have to be bringing the world godliness, davening, family, guests, all of the above. Yes, and yes, and yes to that as well. And here the Alter Rebbe writes something. Again, it's not unique. It's not original with the Alter Rebbe. But again, it's one of those things that he brings to the fore. It's a little uncomfortable. I have a joke that I say, I took a poll and I asked everybody, who is 100% objective, that has no bias towards any particular outcome? They simply academically assess the facts and make a decision. And everybody agreed it's me. Because everyone you ask says, oh, me. I mean, we think that we're perfectly objective. We like to think that. We want to think that. Maybe we even aspire to it. But it's not possible. Because we all are born with a certain character of our neshama. But we don't think that way. This is why, we have a tendency to think that anyone who disagrees with me because they don't have the information that I have. And I will explain it to them until they'll understand my perspective. Or they just have some agenda. That is, they know that academically I am correct, and they have some alternative agenda. And that's why they are deliberately misrepresenting or misunderstanding what I'm saying. And here, what the Alter Rebbe says, which is pretty radical, is it's not that way. That they see it differently, not only because they have an academic philosophy that is different, but because they have a neshama distinction. But that should not restrain them. It's like a limitation, a spiritual personality limitation, which sounds like a very strong negative, that can be overcome. And this is why, and the Alter Rebbe will cite an example here, you have disputes in the Talmud. That is, you have two people who have access to all the same information. Meaning, in a classic Talmudic argument, one party will present their idea and their support. The other one will say, no, that's not how you understand it. You should understand it this way. And they go back and forth. And quite often, it's never resolved. So you have two sages who are both committed to the absolute emes. It's not like, oh, I want it to win for my team. And they have the same IQ. And they have access to all the same data. And they come up with completely mutually exclusive decisions and opinions. How is that? And here our argument is, because they have different spiritual personalities. And I think as we're getting closer to Mashiach, perhaps the world is becoming a little bit more accepting of this. And again, at a certain point, it feels uncomfortable because I think I'm being academic, and you're just telling me it's basically vanilla or chocolate. I can't talk you into saying that this tastes better than that. Your taste buds like this flavor, my taste buds like that flavor. And even if I'll educate you and I'll teach you, and yes, you'll come and you'll see, and so on. But at a certain point, this is what I like. Now, the most profound illustration of this is between two of the most prominent schools in the Talmud times. And those that you've heard of them, I'm sure. And this is now, Hillel and Shammai were two original scholars, and they had two schools. And Beis Shammai was known for being more restrictive, and Beis Hillel for being more lenient. Now, on the surface, unfortunately, sometimes it's portrayed like Shammai is some mean guy, and Hillel is a sweetheart. Now, we as a basic general rule, follow the laws of Hillel. Perhaps one of the most common examples that we're familiar with is Hanukkah, that Hillel is the one who says that the most beautiful of beautiful ways of fulfilling the mitzvah of Hanukkah is to add another candle every night of Hanukkah. And Shammai says to take away another candle, to start with 8 and go down to 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. And Hillel cites his premise, and Shammai cites his premise, and they go back and forth, and that's it. That's not like one says, okay, you're right. And we decided to follow Hillel. All along, curiously, we argue that ultimately, when Mashiach will come, we will rule like Shammai. So why don't we just skip to it right now? Since we are declaring that we will ultimately rule like Shammai, so let's just rule like Shammai now. Why are we waiting around? Just rule like Shammai. So we explain, because right now, we are not ready for that. Well, what do you mean? We know this is what it's going to be. So why not? I mean, we can light 8 candles the first night. It's not like we're incapable of doing it. It's not even like you may be saying that Shammai makes a demand on us that we're not capable of doing. You know, just daven all day. We can't do it, or whatever it is. You might say, well, that we can't do it. We're not physically capable of executing that Shammai opinion. But we can light 8 candles. I mean, we are physically capable of doing it. That's not the issue. So why not just do it? So we explain, because what the world needs in this circumstance is more Hillelness, and we're not ready to do the Shammai. I'll give you an example, one that everyone here is, I'm sure, familiar with. There's a somewhat famous story about the man who came to Hillel, and he said, teach me the whole Torah while I stand on 1 foot. And Hillel said, that which is displeasurable to you, don't do to your neighbor. The rest is commentary. Now go and study. And this is often quoted, and the Alter Rebbe has a whole chapter on it as to how is love your neighbor as yourself, the premise for the mitzvahs that are between man and God. What does it have to do with mezuzahs and matzah and lulav and so on? What is perhaps a little less known about that story is that the man first went to Shammai. Now, why does he first go to Shammai? Why doesn't he first go to Hillel? Shammai was older. And in fact, in most of the Talmud, except in Pirkei Avos, which we could talk about for a moment, but in most of the Talmud, whenever there's a dispute, Shammai is always quoted first. Why is Shammai quoted first? Because he was older than Hillel, and he was considered the quote-unquote more prominent sage, even though, as we will talk about, we generally rule like Hillel and not like Shammai. So what happened with this guy? He went to Shammai, and he said to Shammai, teach me the whole Torah while I stand on 1 foot. And Shammai rebuked him with the builder's cubit. That's what it says. So again, the story is told, and we say, see, Shammai wasn't so nice. Hillel was nicer. In fact, in Pirkei Avos, Shammai learned that you should receive all people with a joyous face. And it's tied into this story because he was harsh with this guy and he sent him on. Now, what does it mean, the builder's cubit and harsh? I mean, he's not mean. He's not like some mean guy. What does it mean? So amongst the many interpretations, we suggest that he came to Shammai, and Shammai basically told him the same thing that Hillel told him. You'll note, though, that Hillel phrases it in a little bit more of an introductory level. He said, that which is displeasurable to you, don't do to your neighbor. Start with the don't do. What did Shammai say? Shammai gave him the more direct quote from Torah. What does Torah say? It doesn't just say don't mistreat your neighbor. It says love your neighbor as yourself. Well, that was too demanding. That's the measure, the builder's cubit. It was too restrictive. It was too rigid. So the guy said, I can't do that. So Hillel gave him a starter kit. He didn't say that's it. He said, the rest is commentary. Now go and learn. So we see that Hillel was more permissive and Shammai more demanding. In the Hanukkah example, just to illustrate the point, and the Hanukkah example, Hillel says, look, on the first day, what did you see? You saw one day. The second day, the miracle starts to happen. Now, one day oil lasted 2 days. Now it lasted 3 days. Now it lasted 4. Every day, the miracle was getting greater and greater. Because when one day oil lasts 3 days, it's a miracle. When it lasts 6 days, it's a bigger miracle. So every day, the miracle is getting bigger and bigger and bigger until it gets to 8 days. Shammai said, how powerful was the oil? On the first day, it was 8 days powerful. The second day, it was only 7 days powerful, and 6 and 5 and 4 and 3 and so on. So again, it's not right, wrong. It's not, God forbid, that Shammai is some mean guy and he's yelling at everybody. It is that Hillel sees the world through the lens of chesed, and Shammai sees the world through the lens of gevurah. Why? And the answer is that's the essence of their neshama. That is their proclivity of their neshama. And again, we're getting this in science from time to time, that people with different color eyes see differently in sunshine. People with blue eyes, they see better in the sun than they do in with light, and people with brown eyes, whatever it is. And then, just to fill this out more fully, it doesn't mention it here in this chapter of Tanya, we have other pairs like that. You know, Hillel and Shammai. It's not like, and again, they didn't dislike each other. And people who went to Hillel's yeshiva married people who went to Shammai's yeshiva. So we don't want to portray this like it's some sort of battle and they didn't like each other and so on. And then we have other pairs like that. Rav and Shmuel, Rabbi Akiva and Rabbi Yishmael, Reish Lakish and Rabbi Yochanan. And there are numerous sichas from our Rebbe, Lubavitch commercial. There are numerous sichas from our Rebbe where the Rebbe explains why is it that Rabbi Akiva sees the world this way and Rabbi Shmuel sees the world differently. And just to use that as an example, because it's similar but different, the Rebbe talks about their life experience. You know, Rabbi Akiva came from abject poverty. So when they ask Rabbi Akiva how much food is necessary to be eaten in order to require an after blessing, well, he has a little different life experience than Rabbi Yishmael, who was a Kohen and maybe even the Rabbi Yishmael Kohen Gadol, because his life experience was different. Rabbi Akiva came from a line of converts who were ignorant till he was 40. Everyone knows the story. So again, his experience with Yiddishkeit was different. We think about Sfardim and Ashkenazim and so on. So within all that being said, that people have a proclivity, and it's not a bad thing, and it's not something that we try to get rid of and beat them down and so on. But we do want to be cautious that it not lock us in and imprison us, that a proclivity not become a prison. So even though, as a general rule, that since Hillel came from a neshama of chesed, like if you recall from way back in the beginning of Tanya, but the Alter Rebbe makes this essential point that every Jew, his neshama is a chelik elokami mal mamish. And even though every neshama has a personality and it trickles down from the process of conception and the parents and so on, and yes, the neshama comes through the 4 different stages, the worlds, and the spheros within the worlds, so it has a bias. and a natural proclivity, like I keep saying. And yet, we're not locked into that, and we can overcome that. Now, in the Gemara, it has a somewhat well-known saying. It said, Rav Abba said in the name of Shmuel that for 3 years, Hillel and Shammai battled. They disagreed. They argued. Now, again, at that time, if you lived in Shammai city, you lit 8 candles the first night of Hanukkah. He was the rabbi, and you went to him. And not just because we did rabbi shopping and we Googled around till we found the guy who gave us the answer we wanted. That was his. Until finally, a voice came out from heaven. God made this decision. And he said, and here's the quote, Elu v'elu, these and these, divrei Elokim chayim, are the words of the living Elokim. V'halacha kebeis Hillel. And the law is like Beis Hillel. So it's not you're right and he's wrong. What does this mean? Elokim is the creation of the world. So in Elokim, there's got to be a decision. I'm sorry, there can be discussion because there's multiplicity. Like even the word Elokim, which of course means Hashem, but it ends in the plural suffix of Yud Mem, Im. So that's where there is opportunity. But halacha, that is Yud Kei Vav Kei. In halacha, that's when we illustrate and we manifest the very essence of Hashem, which is why you have to follow the halacha, even if it doesn't match with your neshama, even if it's not yours. And again, as we'll see, this was throughout all of Torah and all of our history. The great accomplishments are when people went outside of their, as we use the phrase, comfort zone. When we go outside of our comfort zone, we touch upon the infinity of Hashem, the Shem Havaya. See, here we go. We see that there are numerous examples where Shammai is lenient and Hillel is demanding. But what do you mean? I thought Hillel's the nice guy. Or Hillel is the lenient guy. Because Hillel and Shammai and every person have a neshama that comes from the essence of Hashem. And the essence of Hashem is not locked in to any aspect. Every parent knows this because you have to become everything. The scheduler, the chauffeur, the disciplinarian, the educator, the comforter, the supporter, etc. L'lamdeinu, which teaches us Sha'af Beis Shammai, Sh'shordish Nishmasa B'Bechinas Smol Ha'elyain, that even though Beis Shammai's essential nature came from that left side of Gevura. And again, this is what it means, that everybody has a personality. Again, it's a hard thing for us to get our arms around. We like to think, not me. I just assess the facts as they are. I have no innate preferences. I am just play right down the middle. And again, we're trying to. But it's literally not possible because of our life experiences and so on. I mean, I use an analogy. If you think about the great revolutionary moments in history, they come to this country, they issue the Magna Carta. Well, it's still basically based off the English system. Even our wildest imaginations of robots and so on are still based off a somewhat humanoid experience. You know, Steve Jobs didn't invent computers. He took what was there and popularized it. You know, people think, oh, this is a totally radical new idea. I don't know about that. I don't know if it's totally radical. It is a build on a build on a build on. So Shammai, his neshama, quote unquote, whether he's aware of it or not, and everybody's neshama, has a certain tendency because of its origin. And that's not a bad thing. And we're not telling a person to go and look for that which is least aligned with their character. And it's not that Shammai is looking for awkward things and trouble. He's not looking for trouble. But that, and then again, if you ask him, he gives you a perfectly rational explanation. Again, he's not just saying, well, that's just what I think. I just feel that way. You know, I just feel. And again, that's not completely illegitimate. Just to share a quick thought. When I was younger, I used to think it was so stupid when people say I'm looking for truth. Because I'd say to them, how will you know when you find it? Well, I'll just know. I thought that's ridiculous. But maybe that's true. But right, that's it. Right, I'll just know. Because anytime you make an academic argument, it's predicated on some certain rules. How does Torah make sense? Well, I'm accepting whether it's Euclidean geometry or Newtonian physics or some other system, which essentially I've decided that that's the system worth following. Why? I don't know. Again, it comes down to some aspect of it. And this is what we're saying. How do we know? Because Shammai is able to be lenient. And if he's never able to be lenient, then he's restricted to only the manifestation of his neshama, not what we call atzmus, the very essence of his neshama. So again, his neshama comes down from the left side. The left side is more about restraint of self, and therefore his greater tendency is towards no. That's his greater tendency, is to be more demanding, to tell the guy, love your neighbor as yourself with the builder's cubit, to be really measured. And Hillel is more lenient. Again, not that he says, well, I don't care. He sees it that way. He genuinely sees that way. How do you know it's genuine? Because when the time comes for it to be lenient, Shammai can be lenient. And when the time comes to be restrictive, Hillel can be restrictive. Otherwise, he's just doing what he wants. And that's what we see. Shammai is, again, the Gevura person, and therefore he is constantly and commonly ruling in the restrictive. And Hillel, Hillel, his neshama came from the right side, which is, again, more expansive. So, yes, could you use your imagination to see that can be godly? Yes. And therefore, his tendency is to be more permissive. Because Hillel said, can we find a way to release this godliness? So again, it's not like Hillel saying, well, I felt bad for him. I just wanted him to have what he wanted. Hillel, because that was his strong point, he could find a way to release. Remember, usr means trapped, and mutter means free. He could find a way to free that godliness and allow it to be reunited with the infinity of Hashem, even when Shammai was saying, no, there's no way you can bring this godliness back to God except by avoiding it, as we know with prohibited and permitted. But nevertheless, again, Shammai could at times, again, not just because he had to try it on for size. It's not like, well, I said no to the first three guys. Let me say yes to the next guy. This is a serious thing. There have actually been studies that if people go before a judge, not for murder trials, but for parking tickets, if he's let the last three guys off, the next guy is more likely to get fined because the judge thinks, I have to even things out. It's subconscious. They talk about this, pardon this, in baseball. If he called the first two pitches strikes, he's more likely to call the next close pitch a ball because he's just, I did that too much already. Now I have to be more lenient in this circumstance. Again, these are psychological studies and so on. That's not what we're talking about here. That's not this. It's not like Shammai says, well, I've been so strict the last 2 weeks, I'm going to be lenient this week. Again, he's not locked into it, even though that's his premise. His premise is no, with a deviation to a yes. Not because he's a mean guy. And Hillel is yes, with a deviation to a no. And again, that's why if there's never a deviation, it's like getting 100 on every test. If there's never a deviation, then you start to get a little suspicious. If I flip a coin, it's 50-50 heads or tails. If I flip it 1,000 times and every time it comes up heads, why not each one? Well, you start to wonder. Because Beis Hillel is also align with the left side. Nobody is only one-sided. Nobody is only the right or the left side. Everybody's got both, again, but what is their dominant hand? Just like a person is right-handed or left-handed. That this is what it means when it's holy. What's the difference? The classic example to the other side is Esav. The reason why Yaakov is successful, again, with his twin brother, is because when necessary, Yaakov becomes like Esav. He literally dresses up like Esav, and he confronts Esav and Lavan and so on and so forth. In contrast, Esav means complete. He's born Esav, he lives Esav, he dies Esav. He never touches his Yaakov. He's never willing to go outside of himself. So on the one hand, you say, well, he's got a much better life. Again, if we just look at Yaakov and Esav's life, Esav doesn't have to disguise himself. He doesn't have a brother who wants to kill him. He doesn't have to sleep in the forest, go to an uncle who lies and cheats, daughter abducted, son abducted. He doesn't have any of that. But he's got total chaos in his life. So when they lay out the lineage of Esav, you can't even make heads or tails out of it. You got wives or daughters, mother. It's crazy. It's total chaotic insanity. Okay. The last Talmud Kitzutz Upir Chas v'Shalom. There can be no divide in Kedusha. So there's no divide in the service of Hashem. So everybody has to have all the midos. That's what we're doing, what Hashem wants. The Talmud says, if a person says, all I have is Torah, even Torah he doesn't have. Why? We can say, okay, he's missing out on the mitzvahs. Because if he thinks that Torah can somehow be separated from the mitzvahs, then he's not understanding Torah. You know, it's like the person who analyzes Torah and says, well, I don't believe in an all-knowing, omniscient God. Okay, but that's not Torah. Meaning, if you're going to study Torah, then you have to take Torah the way it presents itself. And Torah presents itself as the unadulterated word of an all-knowing, all-powerful, omniscient God. So if you don't accept that, then you're not studying Torah. Then you are deciding for yourself what is going on here. Then it's my story and it's not God's story. Then I'm not listening. Then I'm interpreting it for myself. So again, in holiness, there's going to be incorporation. The Rebbe uses the example, we talked about this, I think, last week, of Tishrei. You know, look at Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur, and then look at Sukkot and Simchas Torah. And you say, how did these fall in the same month? How can these be under the same rubric of Yontif? On the high holidays, you know, it's so earnest and intense and solemn, and then it's woohoo, you know, total. How is this possible? Or the Rebbe uses the analogy of a wedding, especially in Chabad. You go to the Kabbalah's party, it's so serious, and we sing the most serious melodies, and he says the mimer, and he goes to the Badekanish, and there's so much awe and godliness and the chuppah, and then the celebration, and it's so unbridled, and dancing and swinging and yelling. What happened? How do these get put together? And the answer is because it's Atzmis, and in Atzmis, you have all of these characteristics all at the same time. You can be solemn and celebratory. You know, they used to criticize Hasidim that they were too happy. You know, again, there's that sense that, you know, serious people are glum and solemn, and happy people are like fat, dumb, and happy. You know, they're like shallow and so on. So they couldn't understand, how can you be so intense and so happy? And the answer is because it's all in the service of Hashem. You know, all you got to do. It's not, I'm not suggesting that it's so simple, but the two can be intertwined with each other. Serious and solemn and joyous can be together. That's, again, joyous and not foolish. Okay, so as we continue, that therefore, since both Hillel and Shammai touch their very essence, their character, the manifestation, their decisions, their halachic decisions, can sometimes overlap, and Hillel can be restrictive and Shammai permissive. Ukadivsiv Avram, like we find by Avram. Avram, when we think of him, his primary dominant characteristic is chesed. He's Avram sitting at the tent. He's Avram going around telling everybody about God. He's Avram defending the people of Sodom and Amorah. He's Avram interrupting divine revelation to go and offer hospitality to three guys he suspects of worshiping the dirt on their feet. He's Avram. And yet, Ata Yadaiti, when does God say that now I know that you fear God, not just that you love God? How do I know? Only when he went to take his son up to the slaughter. So we asked the question. Let's imagine Avram fails that test. He says, I can't do it. So that negates everything else he ever did. He still stood up to Nimrod and defended Sodom, all those other things, rescued his nephew Lot. That negates everything. And the answer is yes, because all of those other heroic moments were commensurate with his character. So was he doing it for himself or was he doing it for God? The measure is when I do something I don't want at all, then I know that I'm doing it for God. That you fear God. When he went out of his character was chesed. And when was he truly serving God? When he did gevura, when he was willing to bring his son up for the slaughter. Similar, Yitzchak, his aspect was gevura, and then he wanted to leave Eretz Yisrael. He wanted to do chesed. And Hashem had to stop him, and so on. What do you mean? Torah itself describes Abraham as the loving one, and Yitzchak is the gevura one. I'm the loving guy. I'm not the gevura guy. So what is that? So here the Alter Rebbe says, right, that's their dominant character. Like the person is right-handed. That means it's their dominant characteristic is their right hand. Doesn't mean they don't have a left hand. Avram is dominant. His dominant characteristic is Avram, the kind one, Avram, the loving one. The dominant characteristic of Yitzchak is Yitzchak, the reverent one, Yitzchak, the one who fears God. That's his dominant characteristic. It's not his only characteristic. And on the contrary, the fact that he is willing to touch the alternative is the illustration that he genuinely is in the service of Hashem and not just doing what works for him. It's, again, a classic thing. Everybody runs into it at some point. So a person starts coming to shul. I love it. It's so interesting. The food is good. The people are good. It's meaningful. What's our Mesiras Nefesh? Hopefully it's not Abraham level. It is. What happens when I get something and I don't like it? What happens when I get to the thing and I say, that's just too weird. That's just too restrictive. That's just too bothersome. That's just too intrusive. That's where you serve Hashem. The service of Hashem is, like they say, keep doing it till you don't like it, then do it some more. Now you know. Our job is to comfort the disturbed and to disturb the comfortable. If we're just doing what we like, then are we really doing it for Hashem? What happens when we don't like it? What happens when we run out? And we say, okay, then we got a garage full of half-started hobbies, skiing and sculpture and piano and Yiddishkeit and families and relationships and so on. And we say, well, that's it. Okay. Been there, done that. I don't like it anymore. I don't want to do that anymore. That's this characteristic. This is what David HaMelech said. Marav tuvcha asher tzafanta. David HaMelech writes, how good, that again, back to our original pasuk, right? I could put it back up if that's necessary. Back to our original pasuk. Marav, this is David HaMelech from Tehillim. Marav tuvcha, how great or the best is that which is hidden, laid away for you, for those who fear you that have worked, for those who take refuge in you in the presence of the sons. This is from David HaMelech. Now, curiously, why does the Alter Rebbe throw in that it's David HaMelech? He doesn't always say who the author is, or he could say Tehillim, or this as it's Kamosha Kosov, as it is written. David HaMelech is the perfect, or another great illustration. On the one hand, he's the king. He's a warrior. Ultimately, King David is a warrior. Shaul killed 1,000, King David killed 10,000. And he's a musician. You think these are such oppositional characteristics. How does a guy who made his identity literally killing people, again, we so crass about it, also write poetry. Why? Because it's all in the service of Hashem. The same David HaMelech who was out killing the Philistines and Amalek and so on, it's the same David HaMelech writing poetry. Why? Because it's all in the service of Hashem. One is violent, the other is beautiful. They're all in the service of Hashem. So now we return back to the letter. Ma'arav Tuvcha. Again, Tuv as opposed to Tov, meaning the best. Koloim, this means Shemidus HaToy VaChesed Asher Hi Bebechinas Helen VeHester. Eitzel Kol Misha Sherish Nishmasa Bebechinas Smol Anikra B'Shem Yirecha Kemidus Beishamai. So again, remember that the ultimate purpose of this letter is to appeal to people to overcome their budgets in the service of the necessity. So again, we talked about this, the difference between being courageous and being reckless. This isn't encouraging a person to be foolish or to be lazy, but to not be so rigid. Don't be so harsh. There's a certain Eis Tzara L'Yakov. It's a time of emergency for the people. It's a time for a person to develop a fluidity, a looseness about it, and not just to be so harsh and rigid in their character, even if that's their nature. Now, with Alter Rebbe has already pointed out that, well, if a person needs to be extreme in his tshuva, so then there's a value, just like a person needs to be particularly fastidious in a mitzvah that they've previously been lazy on. But then we're not even talking about it. Like Beis Shammai. Beis Shammai wasn't failing. He wasn't bad. He wasn't not living up to the purpose. And still, he recognized that he had to touch his atzmus, the essence of his infinite identity, in order to be connected with Hashem. Hine afshu toiv agonos v'tzafun, even though this good is hidden away within the person. Again, as the pasuk says, I should have pointed this out before, just to put it back on the screen for a moment. The pasuk says, "How great is the goodness you have lived for those who fear you." Here, you see, fear you. That's the Shammai people who fear you. Even though your way of serving Hashem is through Yira, like Shammai, to be rigid and punctual and precise, still, it's time for you to get beyond that and to be a little more loosened up. Not just because, hey, don't be such a stick in the mud and you deserve it. It's not that, American vacation kind of thing. Just let it all, go and so on. It's about touching the infinity of Hashem that is hidden within you. That level, even though it's hidden away, so if it's hidden away, how big could it be? I mean, if it was so big, it would make itself known. It would jump out of me. Nevertheless, we're saying it's still big. It's just as strong. Deep within us is just as loving, or as permissive sounds like the wrong word, but a generous character, even if I think I'm not a generous person. Hillel's a generous guy. I'm not a generous guy. And this ties into this classic point, starting from the Baal Shem Tov, that every Jew can serve Hashem even if he's not a scholar. And some of the people who were not scholars were like, what do you mean? You don't expect me to do this, right? This is for other people. This is not for me. This is for holy people. This is for Hillel. Hillel's a sweetheart. I'm not good at this. This is not something that I can do. And the answer is everybody's got to develop every aspect of their neshama. And you got to reach down. This is why it says how good it is, how great, marav, how abundant, how infinite is this good. Meaning how big without end, umid, or measure. Because that's the sort of limitation of this Yira guy, this Gevura guy, is he's restricted. Whether it is that which is hidden away, or that which is for those who seek compassion with you. Shem bali habitachin. And what is it? They have bitachin. Why does a person restrictive on their generosity. Not here we're talking about material generosity, but any form of generosity. Why don't I offer friendship to people? Because I'm afraid it'll be rejected. Why don't I offer advice to people, kindness to people? Because I'm afraid it will somehow harm me. So what do we need to do? We work on our bitachon, that I'll be nice to people. It's not going to kill me. Shebechinas yamin v'chasadim v'tuvam hu gamkem bechinas giloy v'espashkes neged b'nei adam v'loy bechinas tzimtzum v'hester klal. It's this level that is not hidden away, it's not constrained, and it's not restrained. So here to say, well, 1 second. Why does it say for those to those who fear me, not in those who fear me? Had it read biyarecha, in those who fear me, then we would have thought it meant that this is a characteristic that's embedded in the fearers of God. You know, it's deep down within you. The term liriacha means this characteristic of infinity, of this, what I'll just loosely call generosity, is hovering over the person who is more comfortable with the fear of Hashem, with the restraint of expression. But he's got to reach out and touch it, and it takes effort. It's uncomfortable. You know, it's to break some eggs to make an omelet kind of thing. He's got to reach out there. It's not so comfortable to do it. And this is what the Alter Rebbe is encouraging, pushing him to do. Reach beyond your comfort level. Do all you can, then do more. Get to the point where you don't want to do it, then push yourself a little more. We know this. Physically, the only way to get healthier is to push yourself beyond. If you can lift 10 pounds, lift 12 pounds. If you can run a mile and a quarter. And if you don't, you're never going to get strengthened. Sorry, in the parenthesis. Masham liriach liriach. Hainu mishum shkol mashu b'chinas helem b'chol neshama in b'chinas zay einu mulbeshes teich haguf b'moichai b'libai alahu b'chinas makif milmayla. Whatever is hidden away within the person, it is not invested within his body, within his mind. It's not natural for him. It's not in his comfort zone. It's very uncomfortable for him. And that's what he needs to do. He needs to stretch himself to that which is uncomfortable. It's hovering around him, and he's got to stretch himself. And again, as we know, stretching is not comfortable. And if I just do what I'm comfortable with, I'm obviously not going to improve. And if he'll do that, it will resonate in his mind. That is, it will come to be something he can even understand. The liboy, and it will touch his heart. When it is called for, as we said, don't confuse this with saying, like my analogy before, I found the last 3 guys not guilty. I better find this guy guilty, otherwise I'm going to build a bad pattern. So it's not like Shammai said, okay, you know, there's a certain buildup in my mind, and now I got to go left. I got to zig instead of zag, so as not to be so predictable. The point is that the moment calls for it. Like Avram, Hashem called him to bring his son up for the sacrifice, and so on. So it's not just some sort of algorithm that now I have to go left instead of right just to balance things out. But when the time will call for it, and again, that's why you need rebbes, that's why you need somebody to give you that guidance. How do we know that the time is called for it? This is what it means, the abundance, or really the infinite good. Remember that word Rav, we translate it as abundance, but in our context, it means infinity, because we're talking about touching our infinity to the household of Israel that is hidden away and that is revealed. It's without end or measure. Relative to this nefesh, the way it's invested in his body. So yes, the Alter Rebbe recognizes we all have a spiritual personality, like we have a logical, psychological personality. But don't let that imprison you and say, well, I only do that. I only do what I'm good at. Don't make that mistake. Gam ata Hashem tesnagi mohem b'midas chazcha hagol b'li gvul v'tachlis hanikra chesed. Here's the good news, that Hashem will similarly act that way with you. We will go beyond our measured, and Hashem will respond in kind. Like the Maggid of Mizrich explained, that when Pirkei Avos says that the ledger is open and you can come and take whatever you want, but the storekeeper keeps a record of it, and he collects from you knowingly and unknowingly. What does this mean? We ultimately are the determinants of how Hashem treats us based on how we treat others. Hashem looks at how, are we forgiving? Then Hashem forgives us. Are we generous? Hashem is generous with us. See, here the Alter Rebbe is appealing to the person. I know that you are a Gevura guy, and you love to have all your ducks in a row. And it is most comfortable for you for square pegs to be in the square holes and round pegs to be in the round holes, and everything to be all nice and perfect and neat. And that's what you're good at. And, you know, that's what I want from my plumber and my accountant and even my musician and so on. I want people to follow protocol. And then when the time calls for it, again, not just randomly, not just, hey, let's mix it up, everybody, and go crazy. When the time calls for it, there needs to be that fluidity, flexibility, infinity, that change in character. This chesed, this chesed. There's a chesed that is intuitive, and then there is the chesed that we stretch to. So we are not only the products of, well, this is who I am, and this is what's good for me, and love it or leave it. We can change our character. And if you've ever seen people, which I hopefully everybody has, who really have made an effort to change their character and go from being rude, abrupt, to being polite and kind and sharing, not just that they act that way, they genuinely change their character, that's because they touch their infinity. There's a chesed that is sort of the way it is in this world, which is countered by some sort of gevura. It's limited. But this loftiest level, that is called abundant chesed, ein kenegdoi midas hadin lamayl etzamsem roiv chazdoi melispashe b'ligvul v'tachlis. There's nothing that can counter it. It is absolutely infinite. It cannot be countered. Kihu nimshach mibechinas seviv kol almin v'tmir dechol tmirin hanikra keser elyon. This is this level that comes from keser, just as the crown sits on top of the head. It's not contained within the head. It sits on top of the head. So too, this level of infinite is outside of our human experience, and it can be reached and touched by our human behavior to, as we would say, get over ourselves. That he hides in the hide of his face, and he is concealed in his dominion. Now, this original letter continued on, but the Rebbeim's, the Alter Rebbe's sons, who printed the Iggeres HaKodesh, decided not to print it. But we do have it. If you have the lessons in Tanya, you can follow along. We'll just read it through. It's printed in the lessons in Tanya, where I got this from. This is explicit in the concluding passage of the letter, because remember, the purpose of this letter was an appeal for people to go beyond their allotted amount financially to help the Yidden in Eretz Yisrael. So it says that this is explicit in the concluding passage of the letter, which was not printed by the rabbis, long may they live, sons of the illustrious author, that is, sons of the Alter Rebbe. Remember, this section of Tanya was not in the original publication. It was published after the Alter Rebbe's demise, and reads as follows. After the above words from the depths of my soul, I seek to arouse the infinite, that's the key word, abundance of benevolence that is concealed in the heart of every individual in the Hasidic brotherhood. Let it be manifested from concealment to revelation and be translated into action. And so that you will all fill your hands unto God by giving charity with a full and open hand. Through the trusted bearer of this message, because this guy was coming, with this message from Hashem, from the Alter Rebbe, and what is written above in the letter should suffice for the discerning. I am not spelling it out, as I can't tell you exactly. But this is not necessary. The above will suffice. So you understand, push yourself beyond your comfort level. These are the words of the one who loves you. This is, again, the difference between being courageous and being reckless. We're not saying to not be thoughtful about it. That's not sufficient. We're talking about the Alter Rebbe is appealing to you, so you can put your trust there. With all his soul, who seeks your welfare, it's for your own good. This isn't some sort of line that he's selling you, with the heartfelt and soulful longing. Okay? So this, again, it's printed in the Lessons of Time. That's where I got it from. If you have that handy, great. If not, you can see it there. And that concludes this letter. Okay.